The person in the room who says the least is usually the one running it. Think about that for a moment. Not the one who raises their voice the loudest, not the one who interrupts first, not the one who fills every silence with words. The one who waits, who watches, who already made their decision before the conversation even started. That's not shyness. That's not insecurity dressed up as calm. That is power, and it's something you can train. I want you to be honest with yourself for the next few minutes. How many times in the last week did you explain something nobody questioned? How many times did you justify a decision of yours to someone whose opinion deep down shouldn't matter to you at all? How many times did you feel that urgent, almost physical impulse to fill the silence, to make sure the other person understood your position? Most people are bleeding energy in a way they can't even detect. Not in big dramatic blow-ups, not in obvious confrontations. They lose it in constant micro-hemorrhages, the explanation nobody asked for, the automatic justification, the need for someone to agree with you just so you can feel safe. And the most interesting part of all? When you do it, you think you're projecting strength, that you're being clearer, more honest, more authentic. But what people see from the outside is completely different. They see someone who needs to be seen, who needs to be validated, who hasn't quite finished convincing themselves yet. Here's the principle that changes everything. Approval seeking is invisible to you, but it's absolutely visible to everyone else. And when people detect it, even unconsciously, they adjust how they treat you, not out of malice, simply because human beings calibrate their level of respect based on how much you respect yourself. But there's something even deeper going on. Every time you explain when nobody asked, every time you reach for validation, you're sending a signal to the world and to your own nervous system that says, my decisions aren't enough without your approval, and the world takes you at your word. The Stoics had a name for the one thing no one can ever take from you. They called it prohairesis, your power of choice, your inner faculty, the space between what happens to you and how you decide to respond. Epictetus was a slave, literally, a man who had no control over his body, his physical freedom, or his external fate, and yet he built an entire philosophy around the absolute power he had over his inner world. That's not poetry. That's a mental survival technology that has lasted 2,000 years because it works. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. Epictetus. Now, modern neuroscience has a name for what happens when you chronically chase validation. Dopamine dysregulation. Every like, every approval, every small social win, it triggers a dopamine spike. And your brain, which is a machine built for efficiency, not truth, quickly learns to chase that spike instead of the actual goal. The problem is the threshold rises. You need more approval to feel the same thing. 1 becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. And meanwhile, your internal compass quietly disconnects. You stop asking, is this right for me? You start asking, are they going to like this? That shift, so subtle you almost don't notice it, is the beginning of losing yourself. Self-determination theory, one of the most replicated frameworks in behavioral psychology, documented what the Stoics already knew. Human beings operate at their highest level when driven by autonomy, competence, and genuine connection. Not by external rewards, not by social validation loops. And here's the part that makes people most uncomfortable. The moment you outsource your sense of worth to someone else's reaction, you have handed that person control over your nervous system. Not metaphorically, neurologically real. Their facial expression changes your cortisol. Their silence activates your amygdala. Their disapproval interrupts your ability to think clearly. All of that because you surrendered control of your inner world to someone who doesn't even know they have it. The Stoics understood this 2 millennia before brain scans existed. Marcus Aurelius wrote it in his private journals, not to publish, not to impress anyone, just to remind himself, day after day, as the most powerful man in the known world. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Control your inner world. Let the outer one respond. But here's the question nobody asks. Why is this so hard? Because silence is uncomfortable. Because not explaining yourself feels like surrendering. Because holding your energy is culturally confused with being arrogant, cold, or distant. We were taught that sharing more is being more authentic, that talking more is being more honest, that filling space is a sign of confidence. But there is an enormous difference between genuine vulnerability and the need for approval disguised as openness. Genuine vulnerability comes from strength. I share because I choose to, because it serves something, because it creates real connection. Approval seeking comes from fear. I share because I need someone to confirm that I'm okay. One brings people closer. The other makes you dependent on them. Here's how you start rewiring this. Today, with what you have right now. Step 1. Find the leak. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself when nobody challenged you, stop. You don't need to suppress it immediately. First, just observe it. Ask yourself, is this explanation for clarity or for approval? If the answer is approval, you just caught the loop in action. And awareness is the first cut of discipline. Over time, you'll start noticing patterns. There are certain people who trigger the impulse more than others, certain topics where your need for validation runs higher, certain contexts, meetings, social media, family dinners, where the loop fires automatically. Don't judge it. Just map the terrain. You can't change what you can't see. Step 2. Speak from stillness, not anxiety. Before you respond in any high-stakes moment, a confrontation, a negotiation, a difficult conversation, take one slow breath. Just one. That gap between stimulus and response is where your character lives. Epictetus built an entire philosophy inside that gap. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire from inside that gap. When you respond from anxiety, you say what the moment demands from you. When you respond from stillness, you say what you choose. The difference between those two things is the difference between being reactive and being free. And over time, that pause becomes a habit. The habit becomes character. The character becomes who you are. Step 3. Withdraw your ROI expectation from your actions. This is the hardest one and the most transformative. Stop measuring whether your actions generated the reaction you were hoping for. Act with integrity because it's who you are, not because it's going to pay off. The Stoics called this living according to virtue for its own sake. Behavioral science calls it intrinsic motivation. Both traditions, separated by 2,000 years, arrive at the same conclusion. When your actions depend on the other person's reaction, you are always vulnerable. Because The other person can change, can ignore you, can fail to understand. When your actions depend only on your values, you become immovable, not because you're rigid, but because you no longer need the world to confirm that you're on the right path. That is what it means to have a self that no one can destabilize. There is an exercise the Stoics practiced called memento mori, remembering death, not as something morbid, as something practical. Imagine you have exactly 1 week to live. Would you still spend that time explaining yourself to people who don't matter? Would you still measure your decisions by how many people approve of them? Would you still wait for validation before you acted? Of course not, because in the face of finitude, the superfluous falls away on its own. The irony is you don't need to face death to live that way. You just have to choose it every day, in every conversation, in every moment where the impulse to seek approval shows up. You can choose to be the person who already answered the question on the inside, the person who doesn't need the room to confirm what they already know. You don't need the room to validate you. You need the room to feel you, and that is a completely different thing. There are people who walk into a space and every eye follows them, not because of the volume of their voice, not because of how much physical space they take up, but because of the quality of their presence. That presence isn't built by talking more. It's built from the inside, from the person who has already made their decisions, who already knows their worth, who no longer needs the world to confirm it. The quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous, not because they're hiding something, but because they've already settled something inside. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. Save this. Come back to it the next time you feel the pull to explain yourself, to perform for the audience, to prove something you already know is true. Because the ones who have truly arrived don't announce it. They simply are.